Now, for starters, it is dumb and obnoxious to bother people at the dinner table. But it's dumber and more obnoxious to equate that to putting on tactical gear, arming up, and storming the U.S. Capitol in a siege that took 5 lives and might have killed many more. But most of all, saying that everyone's responsible is really no different than saying no one is. Worse, this whole gaslighting effort is being done under the fig leaf of maintaining national unity, as though collective amnesia about the worst national disunity in generations is somehow the healthy choice in a functioning democracy.
Now Republicans are talking about unity. That was also a big theme of President Biden's inauguration address. They also seem to think that unity means compromising, specifically on policy. How do you see it?
Well, let me start with, how about if we're unified against insurrection? How about if we're unified for accountability? Unity starts with accountability.
That, of course, is Massachusetts Democrat Elizabeth Warren, and nobody would pretend she shares much in the way of governing philosophy with, say, Florida Republican Marco Rubio. When it comes to accountability, just listen.
This is not about politics. This is about accountability. Someone needs to be held accountable for what's happened here, but it's also about preventing this from happening in the future. This is not about hurting anybody politically. This is about getting to the truth.
Senator Rubio saying what needs to be said at a moment like this. Unfortunately, that's not quite what you just heard. That is the senator in 2013 defending the Benghazi investigation. Here's Rubio now.
I think the trial is stupid. I think it's counterproductive. We already have a flaming fire in this country, and it's like taking a bunch of gasoline and pouring it on top of the fire.
So with that, let's go to CNN's Ryan Nobles at the Capitol on this historic night. So what is the latest on the timetable for this trial?
Well, the clock is ticking, Anderson. The impeachment managers brought the articles over tonight. Tomorrow, the senators will be sworn in. The presiding judge will take his position in looking over this trial, and then begins the paperwork phase of this. About roughly 2 weeks of time for President Trump to get his legal affairs in order. There are 2 deadlines where that paperwork needs to be submitted, all in time for the trial itself to begin on February 9th.
And can you explain why the Senate President Pro Tem Patrick Leahy will be presiding instead of Chief Justice John Roberts, and what else the trial may look like in terms of witnesses and lawyers?
Yeah, it's a good question, Anderson. Under normal circumstances, if President Trump were still the president, constitutionally, the Chief Justice would be required to preside over this impeachment trial. But because he's no longer the president, that allows the Senate some flexibility. And so the Chief Justice decided he did not want to be a part of it. Then it would fall to Vice President Kamala Harris. There was a conflict of interest with her serving, given the fact that she was part of the election. So then it falls to Patrick Leahy. He is the most senior member of the Democratic majority, and so that's why he's going to take on that role. In terms of how the trial itself will take place, the possibility of witnesses, those are all things that are on the table right now. Republicans have said that they think that President Trump should be afforded the opportunity to call witnesses if he sees fit. But at the same time, they want this trial to wrap up as soon as possible, and the more witnesses that are called, the longer it will take.
And I understand there's new reporting about how the former president is preparing for the trial.
Yeah, that's right. He's trying to assemble a legal team, Anderson, and what our Jeff Zeleny is learning is that it hasn't been an easy process. He has hired Butch Bowers, who's a lawyer from South Carolina, who's agreed to represent him. They've tried to reach out to other lawyers in South Carolina to do that job as well. But what they're finding when they reach out to many of these law firms is that they just don't want to be a part of this process. Not only are they fearful of the perception that there may be by attaching themselves to the former president during this trial, they're also worried by something as simple as they might not get paid. So that's made the process very difficult for President Trump. One thing we know for sure, Senator Lindsey Graham, who's of course a close ally of President Trump and also someone that has helped him assemble his legal team, Graham said today that he spoke to President Trump about the trial itself, and that even the former president just wants to get this whole situation behind him.
Ryan Nobles, appreciate it. Thanks. Joining us now is Rhode Island Democratic Congressman David Cicilline, who's be one of the managers making their case before the Senate. Congressman, thanks for joining us. So you hear pushback from some Republicans that this trial will be divisive, it's unwarranted, or even unconstitutional. What do you make of their arguments?
Well, this is a very important proceeding. The President of the United States, now the former President of the United States, incited an attack on our Capitol, insurrection that resulted in the death of 5 people, dozens others injured, serious damage to the Capitol, all to prevent the peaceful transition of power and to remain in office. This was a direct assault on our democracy, and so he must be held accountable. And of course, we are all unified in condemning domestic terrorism and making certain that anyone who engages in this kind of attack on the government of the United States is held fully accountable from the president on down. And, I know there's been some argument about the fact that he's a former president, but it has always been the practice of the United States Senate from the very earliest Congresses that former officials are subject to impeachment and trial. It would be a very dangerous precedent to depart from 200 years of history, because you don't want to invite a president or a federal official to just wait to the near end of their term and commit the most serious misconduct, an attack on our democracy, and figure they can avoid responsibility because it's near the end of their term. A president is responsible from the first day in office to the last day in office for their conduct, and we have a constitutional responsibility to hold this former president accountable and to proceed with the trial in the Senate.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that it's unconstitutional to try a president no longer in office, by that logic, any corrupt president could just resign before being tried by the Senate, thereby avoiding not just possible conviction, but also the separate penalty that allows the Senate to bar him or her from ever holding federal office again.
That's right. And our framers understood that, which is why they created that second penalty. If you simply allow people to resign before they could be impeached or convicted or tried, they could avoid what our framers intended was a sanction or a punishment. And, importantly, if you think about someone who's going to attack the peaceful transition of power and try to hold on to power despite the will of the American people, that's going to happen at the end of their term, not at the beginning. So it presents a very dangerous precedent if we were to say, look, a president or vice president gets a constitutional freebie. You get one free thing, just do it near the end so that it'll be late in your term. That would be very, very dangerous for our democracy. And our framers understood that, which is why it has always been the practice that former officials are subject to impeachment and trial in the Senate.
Do you expect to present video footage during the trial or call witnesses? And if so, do you know who they would be?
I hope you won't hear any of the impeachment managers talking about our trial strategy. What I can say is we will present overwhelming evidence that the former president of the United States, incited a violent attack on the Capitol, a bloody attack that involved efforts to hang the vice president, murder the Speaker of the House, hunt down members of Congress, but most importantly, to stop the sacred ritual of the meeting of the Electoral College, which represents the peaceful transfer of power from one president to the next. And the President of the United States incited that violence in an effort to stop that from happening so that he can remain in office. We're going to present a very strong, very robust case. And I think at the end of it, the 100 jurors that will have heard that evidence will come to one inescapable conclusion. The former president of the United States committed high crimes and misdemeanors by inciting a violent insurrection against the government of the United States, and he must be found guilty.
Half of those jurors are Republicans, though. Is it clear to you what is going on with congressional Republicans? I mean, you have, Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney on one side. You have the Kevin McCarthy's, Marco Rubio's on the other side. Mitch McConnell, I'm not sure exactly where he is, I guess somewhere in between. It does seem like there is a real split in the GOP these days.
Well, it's important to remember this is the most bipartisan impeachment in American history. You had the third-ranking Republican in the House saying the president summoned the mob, he assembled the mob, he lit the flame, he was responsible for the violence at the Capitol, and many other Republicans who have made similar comments. What I hope is that we have 100 jurors, that they'll listen to the evidence, that they'll listen to the arguments, and they'll render a fair and impartial verdict based on that. And I think when they do, they will conclude that there is overwhelming evidence that this former president committed the high crime and misdemeanor of inciting an insurrection against the government of the United States. So we have 100 jurors, and we'll present our case and make our arguments, and hope that they will conclude that we have proved our case and find the former president guilty of inciting an insurrection.